In the spring of 1913, when the wheat fields shimmered like coins under the Oklahoma sun, a new rumor swept through the town of Red River Bend. They said a woman named Miss Eleanor Wren lived alone in the old farmhouse on Ash Willow Road, and that she collected dolls, not porcelain, not wooden, but dolls that somehow wore real human faces. Children dared each other to peek through her windows, only to run screaming when they swore they saw eyes that blinked back. But Eleanor was not the witch they imagined. Behind those shuttered windows, she sat quietly in her parlor, sewing with trembling hands, surrounded by dolls perched on shelves, 27 of them. Each wore delicate dresses and lace bonnets, and beneath their glass eyes was something uncanny. Skin-like texture, freckles, even wrinkles. Every face told a story. One windy evening, a young schoolteacher named Thomas Avery came to her door. He'd just moved to town and needed shelter from the approaching storm. When she opened the door, he froze. Behind her shoulder, the parlor was dimly lit by oil lamps, and the dolls seemed to watch him. "I mean no trouble, ma'am," Thomas stammered, "just until the rain lets up." Eleanor's gray eyes softened. "You're welcome to wait by the fire. The plains can be cruel this time of year." He stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something older, preserved like a museum. On the mantel rested an old photograph of a smiling couple and a child. Thomas pointed to it. "Your family?" Her eyes flickered. "Once," she whispered, "long ago." As thunder rolled over the prairie, Eleanor poured him tea. Her hands shook slightly. Thomas noticed burn scars along her wrists. He didn't ask. "You're new to Red River Bend?" she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am." Teaching at the one-room schoolhouse near the creek, her lips curved faintly. "I once taught there too, before. Everything changed." "What happened?" he asked gently. She looked toward the shelves of dolls. "Fire," she said. "Took my husband, my little girl, and half the town's kindness with them. People blamed me for the fire?" She nodded slowly. "And maybe they were right." Thomas stayed the night as the storm raged. He couldn't sleep, because in the flicker of the lamplight, he swore one of the dolls moved. It was a little girl doll with red yarn ribbons and eyes too lifelike. When he blinked, its lips seemed parted. He rose quietly, approached the shelf, and touched the doll's cheek. It was soft, warm even. He drew back his hand. The next morning, Eleanor served breakfast as if nothing had happened. "Sleep well?" she asked. Thomas hesitated. I thought I saw one of your dolls." She smiled thinly. "They only move for those who carry sorrow." That afternoon, Eleanor let Thomas look more closely at her collection. "This one," she said, pointing to the red ribboned doll, "was my daughter Clara. She died in the fire." Thomas swallowed hard. "You made her doll from her belongings?" Eleanor's eyes shimmered. "From what remained." She lifted the doll tenderly. "I couldn't let her vanish completely. So I preserved what I could, her freckles, her curls, her memory. You see, these faces aren't stolen. They're saved." Thomas felt both horror and awe. Eleanor continued, "When you lose enough people, you learn how fragile faces are. They fade faster than voices. In town, people spoke of Eleanor as if she were cursed. They said she robbed graves, that she skinned bodies to make her dolls. No one dared confront her, but mothers crossed themselves when passing her house. Thomas, however, began to visit often. He brought books, bread, and sometimes laughter. He saw not a monster, but a woman keeping grief alive in the only way she knew. Still, one afternoon, when a local farmer's wife went missing, the town's whispering turned to anger. Someone shouted in the saloon, "That doll witch took her." You know what she does. A mob began to gather by sundown. Eleanor was trimming the lace on a new doll when she heard the shouting outside. "Burn the witch! She steals faces!" Thomas raced to her house shouting for them to stop. "She hasn't hurt anyone." But the mob had already thrown a torch into her yard. Flames caught the dry weeds. Eleanor stepped outside, holding the new doll against her chest. Her face was calm, almost resigned. "Leave me be," she said softly. "You don't understand." "Where's Mary Haskins?" someone yelled. "The farmer's wife." "She's gone." "I haven't seen her," Eleanor said. But fear clouded her eyes. Sheriff Briggs arrived before the mob could act further. He searched Eleanor's house, ignoring her tears. He found shelves of dolls and a basement lined with jars of preserved herbs and wax, but no sign of the missing woman, until he noticed a fresh doll on the table, half finished, with a pale, delicate face. The sheriff froze. "Where did you get this?" Eleanor whispered. "I didn't make that one." "It appeared on my doorstep this morning." Her words were dismissed as madness. Thomas stood between her and the sheriff. "She's telling the truth." But the sheriff wasn't listening. He took her away. In the small brick jail, Eleanor sat behind iron bars, holding nothing but her rosary. Thomas came to visit. "They won't believe me," she said quietly, "but I know who made that doll." "Who?" She looked up. "Mary Haskins. The woman they're searching for. She came here last night crying. Her husband beat her. She asked me to make her disappear." Thomas's eyes widened. "You helped her run away?" "I gave her money and told her to leave at dawn. That doll she left, it was her gift to me. Her way of saying thank you. But now they think it's her face." 2 days later, word spread that Mary Haskins had been found, alive, in a nearby town, working at a boarding house. The mob fell silent. Sheriff Briggs released Eleanor but refused to apologize. "You scare people," he said. "That's punishment enough." Back home, Eleanor dusted her shelves in silence. Thomas helped her repair the broken window from the riot. When he lifted the half-finished doll, he noticed something strange, a faint inscription beneath the wax layer. Carved in shaky letters were the words, "For those unseen, let them be remembered." Eleanor looked at him. "That's why I do it, Thomas. These dolls, they hold the faces of forgotten souls. People no one buries, no one mourns." He finally understood. After her release, life for Eleanor Wren slowly quieted. The mob stopped coming, though whispers still followed her like shadows. She resumed her quiet days, stitching, sewing, and tending to her rose garden. Only Thomas still visited, bringing fresh ink, old books, and sometimes a loaf of cornbread from the schoolhouse kitchen. One afternoon he said gently, "You could move, you know? Start somewhere new." Eleanor smiled faintly. "A new town won't change what's inside these walls." "Or what's inside me." She gazed at her dolls, their lifelike faces glinting softly in the lamplight. "They're my family now, Mr. Avery." The only ones who never left weeks later, Thomas noticed something odd. Every time he came by, there seemed to be one more doll on the shelf than before. "Miss Wren," he asked one evening, "how many dolls do you have now?" 32, she said. "Why?" "I thought it was 27 when I first met you." Eleanor didn't answer. She only glanced toward the window where the wind rattled softly. "I don't make them all," she whispered. "Sometimes they arrive." Thomas frowned. "Arrive?" "On my doorstep, wrapped in cloth, as if brought by hands I cannot see." One stormy night, Thomas came to deliver books and found Eleanor asleep by the fire. On the table beside her sat a new doll, its face hauntingly familiar. It was a young woman with dark hair and a kind smile. A face Thomas hadn't seen in 2 years. His wife's face. He staggered backward, heart pounding. His wife, Margaret, had died in a river accident before he came to Red River Bend. Her body was never found. "Eleanor," he gasped, where did you get this one?" She woke, startled. "I didn't make her," she said. "It was here when I returned from the garden. I thought perhaps someone left it for me." Thomas trembled. "That's my wife's face." Eleanor studied the doll gently, then looked at him with sorrow. "Sometimes," she said softly, "those who are lost find their way to me." Not in flesh, but in remembrance. Thomas sat down, his voice breaking. "You mean she's here? Her spirit?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "Maybe so. I don't fully understand it. I never wanted to create fear, Thomas. I only wanted to keep love from fading. Each face belongs to someone forgotten by the world, but remembered by God." Thomas stared at the doll, tears blurring his eyes. For the first time since his wife's death, he whispered her name without pain. Days turned into weeks. Thomas began helping Eleanor document each doll's story. They kept a small ledger, writing the name, year, and what they could recall about the person. "They deserve more than shelves," she said. "They deserve stories." But Eleanor grew weaker. Her cough worsened with the cold autumn winds, and her hands trembled when she stitched. Still, she refused to rest. "One more," she said often. "There's always one more to remember." Thomas begged her to see the town doctor. She only smiled and said, "My time is nearly up, Mr. Avery, but don't fret. These dolls, and their faces, will live on." By December, snow covered the plains. The townspeople noticed smoke rarely rose from Eleanor's chimney anymore. Thomas visited daily, bringing broth and coal. One evening, she called him to her bedside. The room was dim, lit by the soft glow of her dolls surrounding her bed, silent witnesses to her life. "I've written letters for you," she whispered, handing him an envelope. "Instructions for when I'm gone." Tears welled in his eyes. "Don't talk like that." But she smiled, thin and tired. "Death is not the end, Thomas. It's merely another room, where love waits." That night, as the wind howled outside, Eleanor took out a small wooden box and opened it beside her bed. Inside was an unfinished doll, its face blank, waiting. "This one," she murmured, "is for me." Thomas reached for her hand. "You can't," but she placed the doll on her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered something he couldn't hear. The lamplight flickered, then steadied, and Eleanor Wren, the woman who had preserved faces, memories, and love, took her last breath. When Thomas looked again, the doll's blank face now bore hers. At her funeral, only 5 people attended: Thomas, the preacher, and 3 townsfolk who once whispered against her. But when Thomas opened her parlor to the townspeople a week later, something remarkable happened. He displayed her dolls, each tagged with a name and story. As the crowd walked among them, people began to recognize familiar faces: long-lost neighbors, children who had perished, miners who'd vanished. One old woman sobbed. "That's my brother," she whispered, touching a doll's cheek. "He died in the flood of '89. The same townspeople who once cursed Eleanor now bowed their heads in reverence. Months later, Thomas turned Eleanor's home into a small memorial called the House of Faces. He invited travelers and townsfolk alike to see her work, not as horror, but as history. Each doll was displayed with care, each story read aloud on Sundays. People began leaving small offerings: ribbons, poems, locks of hair. Even children came to listen, not with fear, but fascination. The legend of the woman who collected dolls slowly transformed. She became known instead as the Keeper of Memories. Years later, Thomas grew old. On his final visit to the house, he found it quiet and sunlit, dust motes swirling like gold in the air. He sat in the parlor where he'd first met Eleanor. The dolls still watched silently from their shelves. As he rose to leave, something caught his eye. A new doll sitting by the window. It wasn't there before. He stepped closer. The doll's face was his own. A gentle smile touched his lips. I suppose it's my turn. And as the wind outside carried the scent of wild roses through the open window, the house seemed to sigh, a tender sound, neither lonely nor sad but peaceful. For in that quiet old farmhouse on Ash Willow Road, love had found a way to never be forgotten.